With the rise of AI, coding has never been so accessible, and so it's kind of useless to learn new programming languages, right? I think obviously that's the completely wrong take to get from the rise of AI, but it has become way harder to properly learn new things in the software engineering world. Obviously, AI isn't the only thing to blame. We live in a world of constant distraction. I'm not the first one to tell you that, but AI for coding, I think, has made it especially harder because before we had to learn a new programming language to develop and code something that works. Now we can just prompt an AI and in like 15 minutes with like zero knowledge of anything, you can build an app. But because I believe that learning is like the most important thing in life, I've actually started to develop my own learning framework specifically for software engineering to make sure that I keep practicing that skill. So in this video, I'm gonna give you the 3 steps that I follow in this framework and also stay until the end for the secret sauce. This is definitely the easiest part to do, and also the more like passive part of it is just collecting sources. And so while this is probably the part that everyone does, I think it has to be only high quality sources, and I'm gonna get into a little bit more of detail of what I call a high quality source. So for instance, a book or a very extensive documentation about a programming language or a super in-depth GitHub repo that you're reading, it has to be this source of information that is, first of all, huge because you need to learn a lot of things and like read about them and ingest them because you're only going to actually remember maybe 20% of what you read. And while that's just how our brain works, and that's completely fine, it does mean that you have to ingest a lot of information to hope to retain a small part of it. And while I think it's completely fine to ask small questions to AI, or like if you have a small fix that you want to do, it's fine to use a chatbot for that. But I think it's very important when you want to like get technical about something to go to those big sources. The condensed answer that AI gives you, you're only going to remember it the like next few minutes after you ask, but in like 2 months I will ask you the same question and you probably won't remember the answer. And because a big part of AI is kind of doing the reasoning for you, if you want to learn how to do the reasoning, because that's a practice skill, you're not just born knowing how to reason, especially on technical stuff. And so that's something that you need to read and like actually see all the steps of something to understand why you go from point A to point B. You need to get all the details of that. And for that, I think reading is the most efficient way because it's actually, in my opinion, at least it's the only time where I'm really 100% focused on something. For instance, I really enjoy podcasts, but I don't think they're the best source of like super deep and like involved way of getting information, because usually they're just sort of background noise and I'm probably only listening to actually half of the sentences that they say and I retain even less so. And so for me, reading is the best form of like focused learning, and that's also why if you're interested in that, you should check out the playbook that I left in the description. It's like a playbook of methods you can use to implement deep work, and deep work is a key thing you need to be able to do when you try to learn something by reading on it. One last thing on the like why those high quality sources are important is that you actually need to repeat an idea and like read about it a lot of times, because I know that most books that are like this big are quite repetitive, but that repetition is what's gonna help you actually retain the information over time. Okay, this is the like super fun and like practical part. By what I mean by sweat is basically you just have to actually use the thing that you learned. So maybe it's a new programming language, great. You just pick a project that you want to build and you use that programming language to do it. And the goal here is really to convert the knowledge that you learned in the previous step, convert it into actual muscle memory that you can reuse over time. A key part here is getting the right balance between something that's like challenging for you, but also something that is like a project that's small enough that you're not gonna like want to give up halfway, or then it's gonna take you months to do, because you just will naturally remember things better if you had fun doing it. And I don't think, at least for me, I don't think it's really possible to have fun if you're like building an app, let's say, but it takes you 5 months. I think there's no way you have 5 months of fun. But if it's like a weekend project, then you're gonna have like a lot of fun on the weekend and you're gonna remember everything that you experimented during that. That doesn't mean that your project shouldn't have a clear goal. For instance, I don't think the project can just be build an app. It has to be like build an app that does specific things, because you need like a specific defined goal to actually do it. So limits are also important, but it's really about fun. I think it's also important in that step to really let go if you're someone who's really into like detail oriented and really critical of your own work. I think it's really important to let go of that. Just be creative, have fun with it, let it have flaws. It's fine. It's just a small project. It also should be very low stake. So like maybe just something you use, but you don't need to like make it public or share it with other people or expect to build something that you're actually going to use for years, because that's really not the goal here. You're just acquiring the knowledge and the practice that you need for building actual bigger tools and bigger things that will be used for years, but this is just practice. So then this last part, the shift, means taking something that either you know very well or a project you've built before and shifting one thing about it so that you actually get out of your like usual comfort zone. Let's say you're like a Python programmer. Great, you built pipelines before ETLs, amazing. Then try to build a pipeline using Go, using a different programming language, because that's really gonna challenge you and like force you to relearn things that have been automatic for you up until now in your like comfort zone and like comfort languages, and that's really going to try to rewire your brain in new ways. And it's also going to be something really important to understand and make better technical choices, because by experimenting with different tools, you're going to really learn the limits of each tool. And as software engineers, that's something really, really important, especially in anything that's like architecture related. You need to understand why you pick certain tools. You should never pick a tool just because you like it or just because that's what you're comfortable with. It should be like a real technical reason. And there's no better way than to find those limits than experimenting with different tools and finding out which use cases that make sense for. And it can also be actually a good way to spark joy again in like tasks that you have to do all the time, because maybe you're gonna like struggle with this shift that you're doing and like kind of hit some walls. And then when you go back to your like usual way of doing things, it's gonna be so much nicer, because you're gonna think of the struggles that you have in this little like shift project, and you're gonna be grateful for when you don't have those limits and when you're back in your comfort zone. So this part is really all about challenging yourself, but also challenging the tools that you use and all the mechanisms that you do automatically, because that's such a critical skill. AI can now do a lot of the actual like writing of the code, but you need to be able to challenge AI's decision to make sure that you're making the right choices. And so it's really important to sharpen that skill and make sure you develop good critical thinking. Okay, so what is this secret sauce that I talked about? It's not directly one of the methods, it's more something that I do for every part of this framework, and it's to document and take notes, which can be a video on its own, because I think if you don't have a note-taking system or like an internal documentation system, that's something really key for any developer and something you should work on. But really implementing that with the learning, it's very important, and it's a bit more specific. What I mean by taking notes is obviously when you're on the like learning part, you have to, I don't know, highlight passages that you like in a text, or maybe keep important links to like articles that you liked or documentations that you thought were really important to know. But it's also about documenting what you learned and like the challenges that you faced and how you solved them, and like trying to keep sort of a memory of every step your brain went through working on those challenges, obviously keeping the projects that you worked on. And it should not be this like mountain of collection of notes that you never look into. It should really be something where it's super easy to navigate and find certain parts and really only keep key ideas, because it shouldn't be your own like big source in of itself. It's just shortcuts to like bigger principles, bigger languages, key points that you learn, and it should be something easy to reference. And I think that documentation is famously something us as software engineers are not really good at, and it's a skill that we need to practice. And it also means you need to document also things that you learn and your own projects, and that's always a good skill to practice. With that being said, if you're interested in everything around habits and how to be more productive as a software engineer, you should check out the playbook in the description. It's a playbook that I made on habits that are easy and fast to implement to understand how deep work can really help you. And it has small exercises that you can just try after you read it, and also more long-term habits that you can put in place. So I really hope you will remember today's 3 key principles, which are source, sweat, and shift, and try to implement it and keep on learning new things. And I will see you in the next video.